Hi, I'm Carolyn. I used to think family meant safety, until mine burned my lottery check, called me a freeloader, and kicked me out into a snowstorm. They mocked my Christmas gift, then tried to take credit when it turned out I'd won 2.5 million. They didn't just laugh at me, they erased me. So tell me, how do you heal from a betrayal that wears your last name? Because what they did next was worse. Want to hear it? I had barely stepped through the door when I knew I shouldn't have come. The smell of cinnamon and ham filled the house, but it was missing something. Or maybe I was the missing part. I kicked off my snow-covered boots at the mat, clutching the small paper bag like it held something sacred. My fingers were red from the cold, but no one offered me a towel. Or a hello. I could hear my mother's voice from the living room, mid-sentence, laughing. And she made it from scratch. The crust was just perfect. Blythe always had a hand for detail. Of course! I hovered for a moment in the hallway, waiting. Nothing. No one even looked up when I walked into the room. The fire crackled in the hearth, soft jazz floated from the speakers, and my seat, well, it wasn't set. Ginevra looked at me finally. You're late. I brought something, I said, trying to sound casual. I held up the bag. Just something small. Blythe glanced up from her wineglass, smirking. Don't tell me it's another one of your last-minute experiments. I ignored the sting. Scratch-offs, one for each of you. Silence. Not even the kind that holds surprise. Just that stale pause before mockery. You bought lottery tickets? Derek chuckled. What is this, white elephant for broke people? Blythe added, Did you find them in the clearance bin? Ginevra didn't even bother to unwrap hers. You know, you could have at least baked something. It's Christmas, not trash day. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it sliced just the same. I didn't say anything. I set the bag on the coffee table and sat on the edge of the sofa, hands in my lap, listening as they moved on to another conversation. Something about Blythe's new curtains. Something about Derek's fantasy football league. I looked around at the people I was supposed to belong to and felt like a guest no one had invited. Dinner passed without much fanfare. I helped clear the plates while they moved into the den for the annual family photo. I wiped gravy off the counter, rinsed wineglasses, arranged leftovers into mismatched Tupperware. It wasn't until I heard the chorus of "Say cheese" that I realized I hadn't been called. By the time I walked into the den, it was over. The camera was already back in its case. The lights were off. Blythe was texting. Ginevra was adjusting the throw pillows like nothing had happened. Later that night, I saw the photo on Blythe's social media. Everyone was smiling, arms around each other, framed by the tree and the stockings. The caption read, "The ones who matter most this Christmas." I didn't even feel shocked, just hollow. That's the thing no one tells you. Being forgotten doesn't hurt as much as realizing they remembered, and still didn't care. I sat in the upstairs room I always stayed in when I visited. Same faded quilt, same faint smell of cedar and dust. I didn't cry. I just watched the snow fall outside the window, wondering why I kept coming back. Maybe I thought this time would be different. Maybe I hoped they'd look at me and see more than the girl who dropped out of grad school and never got married. Maybe I thought giving them something, even if it was small, meant I could still matter. I opened my coat pocket and pulled out the last ticket. The one I had planned to scratch off with them, maybe laugh about, maybe win $5 on. I looked at it for a long while. Maybe this year, something small could go right. The room was so quiet, I could hear the baseboard heater ticking, a rhythmic little pop and snap like a metronome counting down the seconds of a life I wasn't really living. The overhead light buzzed faintly, but I'd turned it off hours ago. Only the lamp by the bed was still on, casting a soft yellow pool across the old comforter I hadn't changed since I got here. I held the ticket between my fingers, gently, like it was made of tissue or ash. I stared at it, like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel scared. Mostly, I just felt still, like every emotion had been wrung out of me days ago, and I was just waiting to be filled back up with something that wasn't exhaustion. Downstairs, I heard the unmistakable sounds of dessert being enjoyed. Silverware tapping against plates, someone setting down a wine glass too firmly on the table, Blythe's laugh, high, polished, brittle, and Derek's voice rumbling beneath it like a bass note. They were probably talking about granite countertops again, or maybe the ski trip they were planning for January. Aspen or Tahoe, they hadn't decided. Their problems were the kind people liked having. None of it involved me. It never did. Nothing I said ever seemed to reach them. Not in any real way. My stories were nice, my jobs, interesting, my opinions, different. A lifetime of soft put-downs disguised as politeness. And when I gave gifts, they were smiled at and set aside. Not once had anyone ever asked what I liked, or what I wanted for a change. Being around them always made me feel like an extra in a movie they were starring in, necessary to fill a scene, but never part of the actual script. I ran my thumb along the edge of the ticket again. The cardboard had gone warm and pliant, like it had absorbed my hesitation. A weird, quiet intimacy. I reached for the old dime I kept tucked in my wallet, a habit I picked up years ago, back when I'd count out coins in the grocery store aisle, hoping I'd have enough. It was smooth and worn, the face of Roosevelt barely visible anymore. I lined it up against the first square and scratched carefully, deliberately, like I was peeling paint off a wall. The first row, one matching digit. The second, another. My chest tightened. Then I scratched the third. I froze. 3 identical numbers in a row. My fingers hesitated, just for a second. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining it, that I was misreading the symbols, that this was some mistake. But I wasn't blinking. I was wide awake. I scratched the 4th row, and then the 5th. A pattern was forming. Perfect, clean, impossible. I reached for my phone and opened the lottery site, my heart thudding now in a slow, steady beat that felt out of sync with everything else. I typed in the numbers on the back of the card, double-checked, and hit verify. The screen blinked once. Then the number appeared, clear and irrefutable. $25,000. No bells. No whistles. Just a number and a blinking green checkmark, as matter of fact as a weather report. I didn't scream. I didn't leap up. I didn't cry. I sat there, holding the phone in one hand, the ticket in the other, while the heater clicked behind me. The shock didn't hit like lightning. It moved slow, like ice spreading through warm water. A quiet kind of realization that settled into my bones. My first thought wasn't joy. It wasn't even relief. It was, they can't know? Not yet. Not because I wanted to hoard it, or because I was trying to lie, but because I knew what would happen if I said anything. Blythe would laugh at first, pretending it was funny. Then she'd ask questions that weren't really questions. Where did you buy it? Wasn't that the grocery we all go to? Didn't you use Mom's car that day? Wasn't it Christmas Eve, our family celebration? Then Derek would step in, smooth and reasonable, turning facts into favors. You were staying in our guest room, eating at our table, using our electricity. The implication would be there, thinly veiled. It's not just your win. It's shared. They'd wear me down, wrap it all up in guilt and expectation. I'd come out the other side with a slice of something that had been wholly mine, reduced to crumbs. They wouldn't even realize they were doing it. Or maybe they would. I honestly didn't know which was worse. I stood up and crossed the room to the dresser. The mirror above it was cloudy, the glass old, the frame chipped. I looked at my reflection. My face looked the same, but nothing else was. My life had just split in two, the one I'd been stuck inside and the one I could now walk into. I set the ticket on the bed, smoothing it flat. Then I opened the drawer and pulled out my notebook, the one I wrote in when I needed to make sense of things. I flipped past pages of notes that no longer mattered. Shopping lists, reminders to call insurance, a recipe for lentil soup I never tried. On a clean page, I wrote, Montana State Lottery Office Address. Look up? Verify twice. Bus 14 departs 9:10 a.m. Arrives Helena 1:45 p.m. Bring ID, routing plus account number, signed ticket. Do not tell anyone. My handwriting looked calm. Neat. Almost detached. Like I was planning a trip to the grocery store, not preparing to rewrite my entire future. But inside, something had shifted. It wasn't joy, not yet. It wasn't even freedom. But it was the absence of dread. And that felt new. I slid the ticket into the pages of an old paperback. The shipping news, I think. Something no one in this house would bother to open. Then I placed the book deep inside my canvas tote, zipped it shut, and covered it with a rolled sweater and a pair of socks. The heater clicked off again. Silence returned, clean and cold. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. Don't forget to do the dishes before bed. No, thank you for the scarf I spent 3 evenings knitting. No, it was nice to see you. Just another directive, another duty, just like always. I looked down at the screen, then back up at the mirror. I saw the same tired face they always said looked ungrateful, the same mouth they said talked back, the same eyes they never really looked into when I spoke. But something had changed. They had no idea, and I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next morning, I woke early. Not because I had anything to look forward to, but because the smell of bacon and burnt toast wafted through the vents, dragging me out of a shallow sleep. I dressed slowly, pulled my hair back into a loose knot, and headed down to the kitchen like I always did. Quietly, like a guest who'd overstayed. They were already seated. Ginevra at the head, as always, reading from her phone while Blythe scrolled through hers. Derek was slouched in his chair, chewing loudly, and Howard, well, he was stirring his coffee like it was a task he resented. No one looked up when I entered. I poured myself some black coffee and stood for a moment, holding the mug between my hands, letting the heat settle into my fingers. Ginevra glanced up finally. Hope you washed your hands before touching anything. I didn't respond. I sat down at the far end of the table, furthest from the window, and began buttering a piece of dry toast. They continued chatting like I wasn't there. Have you heard about that lottery thing? Ginevra said suddenly, scrolling. Somebody in Missoula won $2.5 million off a scratch-off. Christmas miracle, I guess. Derek snorted. Wouldn't that be a hell of a twist? Imagine if it was someone like Carolyn. Blythe laughed, flipping her hair. She did bring us those charming little charity cards. I kept eating. Ginevra looked directly at me. You still have yours, don't you? I set my fork down slowly, met her gaze. Yes. The table went silent, just for a second, but long enough. That's not funny, Blythe said, but her tone shifted. She was listening now. Derek leaned in. Wait, you actually still have it? I gave a small shrug. I do. That silence stretched again, sharp, intrusive. Ginevra folded her hands. Well, if it turns out you're holding the winner, I think we all know what that means. I tilted my head. What does it mean? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It means we share. You didn't get that ticket on your own. You came here for Christmas. You stayed in our home, ate our food, used our water, our heat. I mean, that ticket was part of a gift exchange. It belongs to everyone. Yeah, Blythe jumped in. It was like a group thing, part of the family celebration. I stared down at my toast. I didn't see it that way. Derek chimed in. I've got a truck payment behind 3 months, and the roof's leaking at Mom's. So, if it is the winner, don't start acting brand new. I set my mug down carefully. I haven't claimed anything. I just said I still have it. Ginevra leaned forward. Don't play coy. You need to remember who's always been here. We've put up with a lot, Carolyn. You've lived off this family for years. I haven't lived here in over a decade. You always come back when it suits you. You take. You never give. Even now, you're sitting on something, and you think you don't owe us a piece? I stood up slowly. I don't owe you anything. Ginevra stood too. If you think you're going to take what belongs to this family and walk away, you've got another thing coming. I didn't yell. I didn't break. I simply walked out of the kitchen. Upstairs, I locked the door to my room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, just adrenaline. I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled hard, staring at the crack in the wall I'd always hated as a kid. I whispered it aloud, just to hear it. This is why I didn't tell them. The ticket was still in my bag, untouched since last night. I didn't even pull it out to double-check. I didn't need to. I knew now that nothing had changed. Not really. Money didn't make me valuable. It just made me a threat. Later that evening, just after the sun dropped behind the frozen ridge, a knock came at my door. I stayed still. After a pause, Ginevra's voice cut through. "You don't have to say anything. Just bring the check down when it arrives. Let's not make this messy." I didn't respond. I didn't move. Instead, I stood slowly, walked to the door, and slid the deadbolt into place. The next day passed in a strange fog. I kept to myself, stayed out of the kitchen, and only came downstairs to refill my thermos with coffee. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel, or worse, beg for space that should have always been mine. By late afternoon, I took my tote and walked to the library. Not to read. Just to sit where nobody expected anything from me. I found a table by the window, opened a random book, and let the silence breathe around me. It was there, in the stale hum of fluorescent lights and muffled page-turning, that my phone buzzed with a message from Ginevra. "Dinner tonight, just family. Let's start fresh. 7 p.m. That was it. No, "How are you?" No apology for the things she'd said, or how she'd tried to wrap entitlement in a lecture about sacrifice. Just a calendar invitation to perform forgiveness. I stared at the message, deleted it, then scrolled back and read it again. I didn't say yes. I just showed up. It was already dark when I walked in. The house had been scrubbed of tension, at least on the surface. Table set like a magazine spread. Candles. Napkins folded like some hotel wedding rehearsal. I knew better than to believe it was for me. Ginevra stood in the kitchen, apron on, holding a roast chicken like it was an offering. Her smile looked tight. "I'm glad you came," she said. Blythe turned from the hallway. "We even saved your seat this time." Her voice was too high, too rehearsed. I nodded, took off my coat, and hung it by the door. I didn't bother asking what the occasion was. I already knew it wasn't about reconciliation. It was about optics. We sat. Forks scraped plates. Conversations tiptoed around anything real. "I've been thinking," Ginevra said, slicing into the pie she'd brought from the bakery. "We've all said things that didn't come out right. But we're still a family, right?" No one responded. She laid a slice of apple pie in front of me. Then, just as my fork touched the edge of the crust, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a tan envelope. She slid it next to my plate like it was a napkin. "Just a little something to make things clear. It's cleaner for taxes this way." I didn't open it. "Just take a look when you're ready," she added. "Nothing dramatic, just fairness." I pushed the envelope aside, still untouched. Then I looked her in the eye. "Fairness?" She blinked. "Well, yes. It just outlines how we could divide things. You know, so nobody feels left out. You're not planning to run off with everything, are you?" Blythe chimed in, swirling her wine. "It's not about taking. It's about sharing. We've always done things together." Derek finally spoke. "It's not that we don't trust you, but it would be crazy not to set expectations now, before anything official happens." I didn't answer. I stood up, pushed the plate back toward the center of the table, untouched. "I'm not hungry." "Carolyn," Ginevra started, "don't be childish. You always do this. You get all worked up." "No," I said, steady. "You always do this. You decorate guilt and call it family." They stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out the front door, coat unzipped, the cold slicing through my sleeves. I didn't care. I needed air that didn't feel choreographed. As I reached the edge of the driveway, I pulled out my phone and texted Selby. "I'm ready to move forward." She responded within seconds. "Then let's do it." Back inside that house, I imagined Ginevra shaking her head, muttering something about me being too proud, too sensitive, too selfish. Maybe she even said it out loud. She thinks she's above family now. No, I just stopped lowering myself to be part of one that never included me. By the time the first soft launch night came around, the paint on the walls of Carolyn's table had barely dried. The sign outside still smelled like pine from the carpenter's truck. We kept the lights dim, the playlist low, and the front door unlocked, just enough to let in curiosity, but not enough to announce anything bold. I stood behind the espresso counter, wiping down the machine, even though it didn't need it. Selby was sorting through the reservation cards. I'd asked her to keep it all quiet. No press, no fanfare. Let the food do the talking. "Tonight's mostly neighborhood people and 2 invitees from the community board," she said without looking up. I nodded. "Let's just observe. No introductions. Let them guess." The door chimed around 6:40. 2 women I vaguely recognized from a city cleanup event stepped in. Then a retired teacher who once failed me in 11th grade. They smiled, took their seats, admired the old brick walls like they hadn't always been here, hidden behind decades of drywall and dust. Then they arrived. I didn't see them at first, just heard the voice. Ginevra's. Loud enough to be polite, just enough edge to command space. "Oh, how charming," she said, walking in behind a woman from the Rotary Club. "It's small, but I suppose cozy is the trend now." Blythe followed close behind, glancing around with that uptight smirk she saved for estate sales and bad furniture stores. Derek trailed behind, hands shoved in his coat pockets like he'd rather be anywhere else. They didn't see me. Ginevra leaned toward the hostess stand. "We're with the council invite. She said we'd be fine to join." Selby glanced at me, then back at them. "Of course. We have a table for 3 near the window." Ginevra chuckled. "Imagine if that freeloader of a daughter ended up in a place like this. Wouldn't that be something?" I didn't flinch. Just kept steaming milk for a cappuccino like I'd done it 1,000 times. Because I had. Not in some glamorous barista course, but through trial, error, and YouTube tutorials with bad lighting. This wasn't magic. It was muscle memory. The room filled gradually. Quiet conversations hummed. Laughter bounced off the ceiling beams. I stayed behind the counter, letting the night carry itself. Then the mayor walked in. He didn't need to be here, but he showed up anyway, smiling like he meant it. He crossed the room, nodding at patrons, and made a straight line for me. "Carolyn," he said, shaking my hand. "Congratulations again. This place has your fingerprints all over it." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Every fork paused midair. Ginevra turned, as if someone had slapped her with a warm towel. Blythe's wine glass trembled just enough to spill a drop onto the linen napkin. I stepped around the counter, smoothing my apron. "Welcome," I said to the mayor, then glanced at the 3 of them. "Table for 3? Ginevra didn't answer. Derek looked at the floor. Blythe cleared her throat. "We didn't realize this was yours," Ginevra said finally, blinking like someone trying to focus in the dark. I smiled, not cruelly, just enough to let her know I'd seen everything I needed to. "Well, now you do," I said. "Enjoy your evening." I turned to walk away, but Ginevra reached out, fingers curling slightly toward my arm. "Carolyn, maybe we could talk sometime. About... maybe you're hiring?" I looked at her, then at Blythe, who was suddenly very interested in the breadbasket. "All applicants go through the same process," I said evenly. "If you'd like to apply, Selby handles HR. We don't do shortcuts, even for family." Blythe scoffed, her voice low but audible. "Seriously? You'd make us apply like strangers?" "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "Like adults." Selby approached then, folder in hand, and gently redirected them to their table. The night moved on. Dishes were cleared. Dessert was served. They ate. because they were too proud not to, but they didn't stay for coffee. After the last guest left, I sat at the front window with a mug in hand, staring out at the empty streetlights flickering over snow. My phone buzzed. A friend of Selby's had written a blog post. New cafe in Missoula is run by a quietly brilliant woman with a sharp edge and a soft center. I whispered to myself, just to feel the words out loud. I've waited my whole life for someone to see both. The night after the cafe's soft launch, I didn't go home. I stayed at Selby's, slept on her pull-out couch with a blanket that smelled like lavender and strong detergent. In the morning, she handed me coffee in a chipped mug and asked if I was ready for the final prep inspection. I said yes, but something tugged at me. I needed to grab my tax documents, still tucked away in my old bedroom. It was early January. The sidewalks were still crusted with half-melted ice, the sky that colorless gray that makes you question if the sun ever really existed here. By the time I got to the house, the windows were dark, but the porch light was on. It looked exactly the same and nothing like home. I stepped inside without knocking. It was quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, just empty. I slipped off my boots, walked toward the kitchen, and stopped cold. The usual pile of mail wasn't on the counter. Ginevra sat at the table alone, a nearly empty mug in front of her, steam long gone. She didn't look up, but the faint scent of something acrid hit me. Burnt paper, like the edge of a candle wick snuffed out too late. I dropped my bag on the floor. Did anything come from the lottery office? She finally looked at me. Her lips twitched, just slightly, like she had rehearsed what she'd say. You mean this? She reached beside her and held up a corner of scorched cardstock. The check, blackened on one side, curling at the edges. I took care of it. My jaw clenched. You burned it? That money was never going to do anything good for this family, she said, like she was explaining a casserole recipe gone wrong. It would have changed things, destroyed what little we still have. Blythe's voice floated from the top of the stairs. We don't need your dirty millions, Carolyn. You think money makes you better than us now? I didn't answer. I walked further into the kitchen. Derek came in from the back door, snow still on his shoulders. You live here. You eat here. You act like a queen walking through a castle you didn't build. I stared at Ginevra. You stole from me. She stood up, slow, deliberate. You walked into this house. That makes everything in it ours. You want to leave with your check? Fine. But you don't take this family's name and pretend you earned something on your own. There was no fire in her voice, just that dead certainty she always used when she decided she was right. I turned without a word, walked to my room, and closed the door behind me. The walls hadn't changed, still had the thumbtack holes from posters I'd taken down years ago. I grabbed a duffel from the closet and stuffed what I could into it. Some jeans, toiletries, that worn sweater I kept meaning to replace. As I zipped the bag, footsteps stopped outside my door. Ginevra's voice came through like a snake under a doorframe. If you walk out now, don't think you can come crawling back. I opened the door slowly. That's the first thing you've said that I agree with. We locked eyes. Hers didn't soften. I brushed past her, walked through the hall like I'd walked it my whole life. Only this time, I didn't look back. Outside, the cold bit harder than I expected. I hadn't taken a coat, just a scarf and thin gloves. My car had been parked blocks away, still with a dead battery. So I walked. Half a mile in, my fingers stopped burning. That's when you know you're in trouble. Not when you feel pain, but when you stop feeling anything at all. A porch light flicked on as I passed a neighbor's home. Mrs. Whitmore. She had always left cookies on our doorstep when I was a kid. She opened her door halfway and called out, "You okay, honey?" I managed a small nod, though I doubt it convinced her. She stepped out in slippers. "You look like you've been out there too long. Come on in, warm up. Do you need a phone?" "I have mine," I said, voice hoarse. "Could I borrow a charger?" She smiled softly and held the door open wider. I sat inside her mudroom while the phone charged on a small side table. The warmth crept back into my skin slowly, pins and needles lighting up my palms. When the screen lit up, a new message appeared. Selby. Tomorrow's inspection is early. We ready? I typed back without hesitating. Let's make this place real. I'd lost the check, but I hadn't lost my name. 3 weeks passed quietly. Quiet in the way a storm sometimes is when it's building just beneath the surface. Carolyn's table had started picking up steam. A blogger from Spokane called it the kind of place that feels like it was made for you, even if no one ever made room before. Customers lingered. Staff smiled more. There was, for the first time in a long while, air in my lungs that didn't feel borrowed. Then the noise started. Selby caught it first. She walked in mid-morning, phone in hand, her brows pressed together. There's a thread in a local Facebook group, a long one. I looked up from the order forms. And it's about you and the cafe. I reached for her phone and scrolled. Accusations, anonymous comments, rumors. She pushed her family aside to play entrepreneur. Heard she used money that wasn't even hers. Ask her who really helped her get this place off the ground. Near the bottom. Trust me, I know her. I'm related. That one hit differently. By the end of the day, 2 bookings had canceled. A supplier asked to confirm our licensing again. One of the staff mentioned getting DMs from someone named Marcy Bell, warning them not to trust the boss lady too much. The name didn't hit me right away. That evening, Selby and I stayed late to review system logs. Bookings had been tampered with. Duplicate entries, emails rerouted, vendor contacts suddenly disconnected. We pulled the admin access report. The IP address was from inside the cafe. Same terminal used by Blythe's workstation. Blythe. She had applied under the name Marcy Bell just after we announced our open hiring event. She'd submitted a resume from a Gmail address I didn't recognize, listed references I never bothered to check. She worked quietly, never late, never too eager. I'd taken it as humility, but now I saw it for what it was. Camouflage. Call her in, I told Selby. 10 minutes later, Blythe sat across from me in the back office, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. You've been working here under a fake name, I said. That's not illegal, she replied. It is when you use it to alter business records. Her face twitched, but she held her ground. I didn't alter anything. I was helping. You were drowning and didn't even know it. I figured you'd thank me. By sabotaging reservations? By sending messages to my staff accusing me of stealing? I didn't. I have logs, Blythe. Screenshots. Server access trails. Every login. She said nothing. I leaned forward. You didn't just lie. You walked into my life like a thief. You used my name to smear me. And for what? So I'd hand you a piece of something I built? She blinked rapidly. We're family, Carolyn. No, we're history. I walked out of the office and called a staff meeting. The team gathered in the front, confusion turning to quiet fury as I showed them the evidence. Emails, logs, even a recorded message Blythe had sent to a vendor, claiming I had mental issues and was not fit to run anything. She stood at the edge of the room, silent now, shrinking. I need everyone to know, I said, voice steady. This business is built on honesty, and this betrayal doesn't reflect on any of you. But it won't be ignored. Selby handed her a formal notice of termination. Blythe didn't say a word, just took the envelope and walked out through the back door. That night, a message pinged on my phone. Ginevra. You always were dramatic. I deleted it before finishing the sentence. The next morning, Selby dropped a folder on my desk as I reviewed the new hiring budget. It was thick, tabbed with highlighter notes. Payroll audit, she said. Started it last week just in case. I flipped the folder open. Her finger tapped one name on the list. A part-time kitchen staffer, someone we'd hired through Blythe's recommendation. There's a discrepancy. Hours billed don't match shift logs. Cash payouts through side jobs that don't exist. Looks like the sabotage didn't end with her. I stared at the page. I think they were testing how far they could go, Selby said. Looks like they were planning something bigger. I nodded slowly. Let's make sure whatever they started ends here. I spent the next 2 hours combing through every line in the payroll folder Selby handed me. She sat across the desk, legs crossed, tapping a pen against her knee in slow, even rhythm. The name that kept popping up didn't ring any bells, not until I checked the emergency contact listed on the new hire forms. A burner phone number tied to an address in Blythe's neighborhood. Of course. The person Blythe vouched for, the one padding hours and slipping cash through fake shift logs, wasn't just a mistake. It was a setup. One meant to bleed the business dry before I had a chance to fully stand on my own feet. Security footage? I asked. Selby nodded. Already pulled. We walked to the back room, the one that doubled as storage and our tiny server space. She queued up the feed from last Thursday. At first, it was just routine. Me unlocking the register, staff prepping, delivery drop-offs. Then, around 8:42 p.m., Blythe, who had been officially terminated a week prior, walked in through the service entrance. She knew the keypad code. She walked straight to the safe, keyed it open like she owned the place, pulled out what looked like a stack of 20s, and tucked them into a to-go bag she'd brought with her. No flinching, no hesitation, just calm, calculated theft. I didn't say anything. Selby stopped the video. We can report this. We should. I nodded once. Call the police. There was no dramatic music, no shouting match, no slamming doors. Just the quiet resolve that comes when you know you're finally done handing out warnings. By lunchtime, the officers arrived. They didn't come in with flashing lights or raised voices. They came in plain clothes, walked directly to the table where Blythe was now seated, somehow back in the cafe again, like a ghost that refused to stay gone. She didn't resist, just blinked slowly, face flushed as they read her the charges. Fraud, trespassing, theft. I didn't do anything, she said, voice wavering. This is a mistake. She's lying. I stepped forward, calm. I have the login records, surveillance footage, the tampered invoices, and the name you used to hire a fake employee. One of the officers glanced at me. That'll be enough. As they walked her past the tables, one of the regulars turned his head. That your sister? He whispered. No, I said. That's someone I used to know. Blythe's eyes welled up. Carolyn, please, don't let them do this. I didn't move. Save it for the judge. Later that afternoon, I sat back in my office, door closed, blinds drawn halfway. Selby came in with 2 cups of coffee and handed me one like we were in a silent ritual. My phone buzzed. Ginevra. I didn't open the message. I just read the preview. How could you do this to your own blood? I laughed quietly. Not bitter, just tired. Then I called her. She picked up immediately. So now you're too good for the rest of us? No, I said. I just stopped pretending you were any good for me. She went quiet. I didn't do anything to Blythe, I continued. She did it to herself. I'm not the villain here. I just stopped covering for the ones who are. You're still a part of this family, whether you like it or not, she snapped. No, I was never part of this family. I was the help, the placeholder, the shadow you blamed when the mirror cracked. I ended the call before she could respond. That evening, as the cafe closed for the night, I lingered in my office, lights low, a chair pulled toward the window. The space felt bigger without her in it. Lighter. A voicemail landed a few minutes after close. A reporter. Miss Rowan, we're running a piece on small business resilience. We'd love your insight, especially with your story. I let it play to the end, then replayed it again. This time, listening not to the words, but to the weight of them. Resilience. They always use that word like it's a compliment. But sometimes it just means you were the only one left standing because everyone else stepped on you. I whispered to the dark, this isn't about being tough. It's about surviving what should have never happened. The issue with being called resilient is that people say it like it's praise, when what they really mean is, you survived things we wouldn't have. There was a photo of me in the local magazine that ran the feature. I was holding a cup of coffee, smiling, though I don't remember actually smiling. The caption read, "Strength isn't always loud." I tore out the page and tucked it in a drawer. Not to frame, not to share, just to keep. A reminder, maybe, that sometimes the quiet ones write the ending too. That afternoon, I let the crew go early. The cafe had run smoothly all week, and the Friday air had turned warm enough to leave the door open without a draft. Selby gave me a wink on her way out. "You earned this lull." It was close to 5 when the phone rang. The landline. Almost nobody used it. I picked up on the second ring. "Carolyn!" Ginevra's voice cracked like it was stitched together from cigarettes and shame. I didn't answer. "I don't know what else to say," she went on. "She's gone. Derek moved. I haven't heard from him in weeks. People keep asking me questions I don't have answers to." There was a pause, just long enough for her to be hoping I'd break the silence. "Just call me if you want to talk," she added. "Or don't. I tried." The line went dead. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt still, like I had finally stepped out of a shadow I didn't know had been over me for decades. That night, the staff stayed late to clean and restock. I offered to handle it, but they wouldn't let me. Selby dragged out a small chocolate cake from the back fridge, the cheap kind with the plastic lid and airbrushed lettering that read, "We see you." It wasn't fancy, but it knocked the air out of me in a way no betrayal ever had. Not out of pain, out of recognition. "We figured it's time someone celebrated you," Selby said, placing one hand on my shoulder. I didn't cry. I laughed. Then I bit into the cake with the plastic fork they handed me, sitting cross-legged on the tile floor between 2 crates of paper cups. "I'm not invisible here," I said. "Never were," one of the kitchen girls replied. When they finally left and the lights dimmed, I stepped outside. The wind was soft for once, brushing against my face like it didn't mean to hurt me. I walked a block down to the edge of the trees, the same spot I'd stood when I left my mother's house all those weeks ago. I closed my eyes and whispered it into the quiet. "You burned the check, but I kept my name. That was always mine." I breathed in deep. No one else was around, no one to hear it but me. And that was enough. I wasn't angry. I just didn't owe her my silence anymore, or my return. Some things you don't fix. Some things aren't supposed to be mended. They're meant to be left behind, the way you leave a pair of shoes that never quite fit right, no matter how much you tried to stretch them. Back at the cafe, the voicemail light on the machine blinked. A reporter I hadn't met before. "Ms. Rowan, we'd love to include you in a piece about women business owners who've overcome personal hardship. You've become a symbol of resilience in the community. Would you be willing to talk?" I let the message play twice. Then a third time. Resilience. Again with that word. I sat down at the counter, turned off the lights, and stared into the streetlight glow dancing on the polished floor. "This isn't about resilience," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "It's about survival, and finally choosing myself." I didn't return the call. I didn't need to, because for once in my life, I wasn't proving anything. I was just living.